Anybody home?
What's the emergency?
Somebody's knocking on my door. I think they're trying to get in. They're banging on my door.
Okay, someone's banging and knocking. Do you know who this is?
No.
Do you have a description of them?
No, I can't see any face upstairs.
Have you asked them what they want or if they need something?
December 30th, 2025. A respected dentist didn't show up for work. His colleagues couldn't reach him. His wife wasn't answering her phone. When friends finally looked through the window, they saw blood next to the bed. The case of Spencer and Monique Tepe has evidence that doesn't add up. A surveillance camera captured someone walking through an alley at exactly 3:52 a.m. Investigators identified the precise time of death down to the minute. Police tracked a vehicle that arrived just before the murders and left immediately after. The probability of this timing being coincidental? Less than 0.01%. Detectives found no signs of forced entry, no weapon at the scene, no struggle. 2 children, ages 4 and 1, were sleeping in the house while their parents were shot to death upstairs. The children were found alive 8 hours later. Columbus police attributed 99% certainty, based on surveillance footage and vehicle tracking, that they knew who did this within 48 hours. Even more disturbing, the person they arrested was someone Monique had divorced 8 years earlier. Someone who had moved on, built a career as a surgeon, lived 350 miles away in Chicago. Someone who, according to court records, had an amicable divorce with no children, no custody battles, no ongoing contact. The Spencer and Monique Tepe case broke every profile of domestic violence escalation. Here's what should terrify you. A successful vascular surgeon with no criminal record, no history of violence, no disciplinary actions in any state where he practiced medicine, allegedly drove from Chicago to Columbus in the middle of the night, walked into his ex-wife's home, murdered her and her husband while their baby slept downstairs, then drove back to Illinois. Think about that. Before we dive deeper into this investigation, if you want to stay updated on what might be one of the most calculated murders ever recorded, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because what we're about to reveal will change how you see crimes of obsession. And drop a comment telling us, can someone really hold on to rage for 8 years and never show a single warning sign? Spencer Tepe was 37 years old when he died. He graduated from Ohio State University and became a dentist with a practice in Athens, Ohio, about 75 miles southeast of Columbus. His employer, Dr. Mark Valrose, who owned Athens Dental Depot, described Spencer as reliable, professional, someone who always showed up on time and always communicated if there were any issues. Spencer wasn't just a dentist. He was involved with Big Brothers Big Sisters, mentoring young people. He was, according to his family, a huge Bengals and Buckeyes fan. Rob Misley, Spencer's brother-in-law, said Spencer was known as a devoted and proud father, a loving partner, and a friend to everyone he met. He was intelligent, warm, and endlessly welcoming. Spencer had 2 young children with his wife Monique, a 4-year-old girl and a 1-year-old boy. The family lived in Weinland Park, a neighborhood just north of downtown Columbus. Their home on North 4th Street was where Spencer and Monique had exchanged wedding vows. They married on December 13th, 2020, during the pandemic. By December 30th, 2025, they were 1 month away from celebrating their 5th wedding anniversary. Monique Tepe was 39 years old. She had a background in childhood education and worked in the education sector. Her family described her as a loving, patient, and joyful mother. She was an avid baker and a thoughtful planner. According to those who knew her, Monique was someone whose charm and infectious smile lit up every room. She had strength that inspired everyone around her. Monique and Spencer were, by all accounts, a solid pair with a bright future. They showed up every day with unwavering love and devotion to their family. Their home was known as a gathering place. Friends and family came over frequently. The couple hosted parties. They were social, active in their community, building the kind of life that people dream about. But there was something most people didn't know about Monique. Before Spencer, before the children, before the life she had built in Columbus, Monique had been married to someone else. His name was Michael David McKee. And that marriage, though it ended 8 years ago, would come back in the most horrific way imaginable. Michael McKee was born and raised in Ohio. He attended Ohio State University as an undergraduate, the same school Spencer Tepe graduated from. McKee then went to Ohio State University College of Medicine, graduating in 2014. He completed his surgical residency and became board certified in vascular surgery, one of the most demanding specializations in medicine. Vascular surgery requires years of rigorous training and exceptional skill. These are the surgeons who operate on blood vessels, arteries, veins. They deal with life-threatening conditions like aneurysms, blocked arteries, vascular trauma. It's a field that demands precision, composure under pressure, and the ability to make split-second decisions that determine whether a patient lives or dies. McKee was, by all professional measures, successful. He held active medical licenses in Illinois and California. He had previously been licensed in Nevada, though that license expired in mid-2025. Public records show no disciplinary violations in any state where he practiced. No malpractice suits, no complaints, no red flags. Most recently, McKee worked as a vascular surgeon at OSF St. Anthony Medical Center in Rockford, Illinois, about 90 miles northwest of Chicago. He lived in a condominium overlooking Franklin Park in Chicago's Lincoln Park neighborhood near the Lincoln Park Zoo. Court records show McKee had minimal traffic violations in Franklin County, Ohio, and no known criminal history in Illinois. He appeared to have almost no presence on social media. He was, in other words, someone who flew under the radar, someone who, if you looked at his life on paper, seemed to have everything together. On August 22, 2015, Michael McKee married Monique Tepe. That was Monique's maiden name before she married Spencer Tepe. The wedding took place in Columbus, Ohio. McKee was 28 years old. Monique was 28. They appeared to be a young professional couple starting their lives together. But the marriage lasted only 7 months. According to court records, McKee and Monique separated in March 2016, just 7 months after their wedding. At the time, McKee was completing his surgical residency at Carilion Clinic in Roanoke, Virginia. Monique was living in Westerville, Ohio, a suburb of Columbus. They were living in different states, pursuing separate careers, and the relationship fell apart. On May 2017, Monique filed for divorce. The divorce was finalized quickly, within about a month, in June 2017. The proceedings were handled through a private judge. The stated reason for the divorce was incompatibility, a common catch-all legal term that reveals almost nothing about what actually happened between two people. McKee and Monique had no children together. They shared no significant assets requiring complicated division. The divorce decree granted McKee the Virginia home they had shared during the marriage. Monique, who was living in Westerville at the time of the divorce, received an equitable division of any other property and debts. No spousal support was awarded to either party. The divorce filing included a standard mutual restraining order, which is common in most divorces to prevent either party from accessing assets without court approval. Critically, the court documents reveal no history of domestic violence, no contested custody battles because there were no children, no allegations of controlling behavior, no harassment claims, no restraining orders beyond the standard financial protections. By all legal standards, this was an unremarkable, straightforward divorce. Once the divorce was finalized in June 2017, McKee and Monique appeared to move on completely. There were no shared children requiring continued contact, no shared assets requiring ongoing negotiation, no social media interactions, no mutual friends posting about awkward encounters. Nothing. They went their separate ways. Monique rebuilt her life successfully. She moved to Columbus, continued working in education, and at some point met Spencer Tepe. Spencer was also an Ohio State graduate, also building his career, also looking for a partner to share his life with. Monique and Spencer began dating. Their relationship blossomed. And on December 13, 2020, they got married. They bought a home in Weinland Park on North 4th Street, the same home where they would exchange their vows. They started a family immediately. Their first child, a daughter, was born in 2021. Their second child, a son, was born in 2024. By late 2025, Spencer and Monique had built exactly the life they wanted. 2 beautiful children, careers they were proud of, a home filled with love and laughter, friends who described them as an extraordinary couple. They were preparing to celebrate their 5th wedding anniversary on December 13, 2025. They made it to December 30th, 1 month short. Michael McKee, meanwhile, also moved on. Or at least, that's what it looked like. After the divorce, McKee continued his medical career. He moved to Nevada for a period, then to Illinois. He settled in Chicago and established his practice as a vascular surgeon. He lived alone in his Lincoln Park condo. There's no public record of him remarrying, no social media presence showing a new relationship, no indication that he stayed in touch with Monique. For 8 years, from June 2017 to December 2025, there is no documented contact between Michael McKee and Monique Tepe. None. Which is why what allegedly happened on December 30th, 2025, makes no sense to anyone who knows the facts of their relationship. December 29th, 2025 was a Sunday. Spencer Tepe spent time with friends. One of his friends later told 911 dispatchers that he had been with Spencer on the 29th, and Spencer seemed completely normal. Nothing out of the ordinary. Spencer was scheduled to work on Monday, December 30th. He had patients at Athens Dental Depot who were counting on him. Sometime between Sunday night, December 29th, and the early morning hours of Monday, December 30th, something happened at the Tepe household. According to investigators, Spencer and Monique Tepe were murdered between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. on December 30th. But detectives later refined this window dramatically. They determined the murders occurred at exactly 3:52 a.m. How did they know the exact time? That detail has not been publicly disclosed, but according to former FBI agent Jennifer Coffindaffer, speaking to News Nation, it likely came from visual evidence captured on surveillance cameras or from cell phone data. Either way, investigators knew down to the minute when Spencer and Monique died. 3:52 a.m. Spencer and Monique were shot upstairs in their home. Spencer was shot multiple times. Monique was shot at least once in the chest. Their bodies were found in the upstairs area near the bed. There was blood on the floor next to the bed. A friend who later looked through the window described seeing Spencer's body lying next to the bed, off the bed, in the blood. 3 spent 9mm shell casings were found at the scene. This tells us the shooter fired at least 3 rounds, possibly more. The casings recovered were all 9mm, a common caliber for handguns. No weapon was found at the scene. This is critical. If this were a murder-suicide, there would be a gun near one of the bodies. There wasn't. Police searched the entire house and found no firearm. The shooter took the gun with them when they left. There were no signs of forced entry. This detail is deeply concerning to investigators. It means one of 3 things happened. Either Spencer or Monique let the person in willingly, or the person had a key, or the person found an unlocked door or window. Former Fort Worth Police Chief Jeffrey Halstead told Fox News that when there's no forced entry in a violent crime, it typically means the victims knew their attacker or the attacker had previous access to the home. The attack happened in the upstairs bedroom area. Spencer and Monique were likely asleep when it began. There's no indication of a struggle that would suggest they fought back or tried to escape. The shooter came in, went directly upstairs, and executed them. That's the word investigators use. Execution style. This wasn't a crime of passion where someone flew into a rage and attacked impulsively. This was calculated. The shooter brought a gun. The shooter knew the layout of the house. The shooter went directly to where Spencer and Monique would be sleeping. The shooter fired multiple rounds to ensure they were dead. Then the shooter left. But here's what makes this even more disturbing. Downstairs in that same house, sleeping in their beds, were 2 children, a 4-year-old girl and a 1-year-old boy. The children were Spencer and Monique's babies. The shooter walked past those children on the way in or on the way out. The shooter heard nothing from those children during the attack, or if the shooter did hear them, chose not to harm them. The children were found 8 hours later, physically unharmed. Former homicide investigator and legal analyst Ted Williams told Fox News that the fact the children weren't harmed suggests something specific about the killer's mindset. It could indicate familiarity with the family or children, he said, though he cautioned that investigators would need to confirm that through evidence. Those children slept through their parents' murder. They woke up Monday morning with no idea what had happened upstairs, and they would remain in that house, alone with their parents' bodies, until friends discovered the scene 8 hours later. At 2 a.m. on December 30th, surveillance cameras in the Weinland Park neighborhood began recording activity that would later become crucial to the investigation. Columbus police released footage showing a person of interest walking through an alley near the Tepes' home. The person is wearing light-colored pants and a dark hoodie pulled over their head. The person keeps their head down as they walk through the snow-lined alley in the darkness. The timestamp on the footage shows activity between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m., but investigators also had surveillance from a different source. Detectives reviewed footage that captured a vehicle arriving in the neighborhood just prior to the homicides. The vehicle left shortly after. According to the probable cause affidavit filed by Detective Russell Weiner, investigators were able to identify a suspect through neighborhood surveillance footage. The suspect was then linked to a vehicle that arrived just before the murders and left just after. This vehicle became the key piece of evidence that would eventually lead to an arrest. At 3:52 a.m., according to investigators, Spencer and Monique Tepe were killed. At some point after 3:52 a.m., the vehicle that arrived just before the murders left the area. Surveillance tracked its departure. For the next 6 hours, Spencer and Monique's bodies lay upstairs in their bedroom while their 2 children slept or played downstairs. The children, ages 4 and 1, were too young to understand what had happened. They couldn't call for help. They didn't know their parents were dead. At 9:03 a.m., more than 5 hours after the murders, Dr. Mark Valrose called 911 from Florida. Valrose, Spencer's employer, told the dispatcher that Spencer hadn't shown up for work and wasn't answering his phone. This was completely out of character. Valrose said Spencer was always on time and would contact them if there were any issues. I don't know how else to say this, but we are very, very concerned, Valrose told the 911 operator. This is very out of character for him, and we can't get in touch with his wife, which is probably the more concerning thing. Valrose asked the dispatcher to send officers to conduct a wellness check at Spencer and Monique's home on North 4th Street. At 9:22 a.m., a Columbus police officer arrived at the Tepe residence. The officer knocked on the door. No answer. The officer looked around the exterior of the house but saw nothing suspicious. No broken windows, no signs of forced entry, no indication that anything was wrong. The officer left. This would later become a point of scrutiny. Standard protocol for a wellness check is to knock, look around, and if there's no clear emergency, file a report and leave. Officers can't break into someone's home just because they're not answering the door. But in this case, that decision meant Spencer and Monique's bodies would remain undiscovered for nearly another hour. By 9:30 a.m., Spencer's colleagues and friends were gathering at the house. Multiple people were now concerned. Spencer wasn't answering his phone. Monique wasn't answering hers. No one could reach either of them. The children's daycare hadn't received the kids. Something was very wrong. At 9:56 a.m., another 911 call came in. A different person, now at the Tepe house, told the dispatcher they could hear children inside the home. I can hear kids inside, and I swear, I think I heard one yell, but we can't get in at this point, the caller said. I don't know if I need to break the door in or just get in the house or what. The dispatcher advised the caller not to break in, but to wait for officers to return. At 10:03 a.m., one of Spencer's friends finally looked through a window. What he saw was horrific. There's a body, the friend told the 911 dispatcher, his voice shaking. Our friend wasn't answering his phone. We just did a wellness check. We just came here and he appears dead. He's laying next to his bed, off of his bed in this blood. I can't get closer to see more than that. I can tell he's obviously not breathing or anything. The dispatcher asked if Spencer had been ill. No, the friend said. I was just with him yesterday. Police returned to the scene immediately. Officers forced entry into the home at approximately 10:11 a.m. Upstairs, they found Spencer and Monique Tepe, both dead from gunshot wounds. Downstairs, they found 2 children, ages 4 and 1, alive and physically unharmed. The children had been alone in that house with their dead parents for more than 6 hours. The 4-year-old girl likely didn't understand what had happened. The 1-year-old boy certainly didn't. But they had been in that house alone, while the outside world frantically tried to figure out why Spencer and Monique weren't answering their phones. The children were immediately removed from the home and placed in the care of extended family members. The family's dog, a golden doodle, was also found in the home, unharmed. The Franklin County Coroner's Office later confirmed that Spencer and Monique died from apparent homicide by gunshot wounds. The official autopsy reports would take weeks to complete, but the preliminary findings were clear. Spencer had been shot multiple times. Monique had been shot at least once in the chest. Both died quickly. And now, the Columbus Police Department had a double homicide with no obvious suspect, no clear motive, and 2 traumatized children who had lost both of their parents in a single night. The Columbus Division of Police immediately launched a major homicide investigation. Detectives sealed off the Tepe residence as a crime scene. Forensic teams processed every inch of the house. They photographed the bodies. They collected the 3 9mm shell casings. They searched for fingerprints, DNA, any trace evidence that might identify the shooter. They examined the points of entry to the house. Detectives interviewed everyone who knew the Tepes, colleagues from Spencer's dental practice, friends who had been at the house recently, neighbors who might have seen or heard something unusual, family members who could provide context about Spencer and Monique's lives. And detectives began the most critical task in any homicide investigation, Establishing victimology. Who were Spencer and Monique Tepe? Did they have enemies? Were they involved in anything dangerous? Did they owe anyone money? Were they having affairs? Were there custody disputes, business conflicts, personal grudges? The answer to all of these questions was no. Spencer and Monique were, by all accounts, exactly who they appeared to be. A dentist and his wife, raising their children, living a quiet suburban life. No secret drug debts, no gambling problems, no extramarital affairs, no business partners who wanted them dead. No disgruntled former employees, no stalkers, nothing, which made the murders even more baffling. Someone had walked into that house with a 9mm handgun, gone directly upstairs, and executed two people who appeared to have no enemies. Detectives knew that in cases where there's no forced entry and the victims are killed in their own bed, the killer is almost always someone they know. A family member, a friend, a business associate, someone with access to the home. So investigators started looking at everyone in Spencer and Monique's circle, and that's when Monique's past came into focus. During the victimology process, detectives learned that Monique had been married before. Her previous marriage was to a man named David McKee. They had divorced in 2017, 8 years ago. The divorce was amicable, no children, no ongoing legal disputes. McKee lived in Chicago, 350 miles away. He was a vascular surgeon with no criminal record. On the surface, McKee didn't fit any profile of a suspect. The divorce was 8 years old. There was no documented contact between McKee and Monique since 2017, no restraining orders, no harassment complaints, no indication that McKee had ever threatened Monique or Spencer. But detectives did what detectives do. They looked at McKee anyway, not because he was an obvious suspect, but because in domestic homicides, ex-spouses are always on the list of people to investigate and eliminate. Detectives began reviewing surveillance footage from the Weinland Park neighborhood. Columbus, like many cities, has a network of private security cameras, homeowners, businesses, doorbell cameras, traffic cameras. All of this footage creates a digital web that captures movement through the city. Detectives requested footage from every camera within a half-mile radius of the Tepe home. They focused specifically on the window between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. on December 30th, and they found something: a vehicle. Surveillance cameras captured a vehicle arriving in the neighborhood shortly before 3:52 a.m. The vehicle was seen again leaving the area shortly after 3:52 a.m. The timing was too precise to be coincidental. Detectives obtained clearer footage of the vehicle. They were able to identify the make, model, and partial license plate. They ran the partial plate through databases and narrowed down possible owners. One name came up: David McKee. The vehicle captured on surveillance footage arriving just before the murders and leaving just after was registered to Monique's ex-husband. Suddenly, McKee wasn't just a name on a list. He was a suspect. Detectives worked quickly. They traced McKee's location. He was in Rockford, Illinois, where he worked at OSF St. Anthony Medical Center. They confirmed his employment. They confirmed his address in Chicago. And they confirmed that the vehicle captured on surveillance was registered to him. But they needed more. Surveillance footage showing McKee's car near the scene was powerful, but it wasn't proof that McKee was driving. It wasn't proof that he was the shooter. Detectives needed to place McKee physically in Columbus on December 30th. They obtained cell phone records, McKee's phone. According to experts who later analyzed the investigation, detectives likely used a technique called geofencing. Geofencing allows investigators to see every cell phone that pinged a tower within a specific geographic area during a specific time window. If McKee's phone pinged a tower in the Weinland Park area between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. on December 30th, that would be devastating evidence. We don't know yet if detectives found McKee's phone in that geofence. Those details haven't been made public. But we do know that detectives found evidence McKee had possession of the vehicle before and after the killings. This suggests they may have found toll records, gas station receipts, or other documentation showing McKee driving from Chicago to Columbus and back. Detectives also began looking at McKee's internet search history. Former FBI agent Jennifer Coffindaffer told News Nation that investigators would dig into McKee's emails, cell phone records, and most importantly, his Google searches. And according to Coffindaffer, Spencer Tepe's name spiked in McKee's search history in November 2025, just 1 month before the murders. Everyone's flatlined, and then all of a sudden he spikes in November, Coffindaffer said. So that tells me that somebody was really looking into what he was doing. If true, this means McKee was researching Spencer Tepe, looking him up online, maybe looking at Spencer's social media, maybe looking at the dental practice website, maybe mapping the route from Chicago to Columbus, maybe planning. Investigators also analyzed the surveillance footage more carefully. The person walking through the alley in the dark hoodie, the way they moved, the way they avoided cameras. Former FBI agent Coffindaffer speculated that the killer had staked out the location well and knew where the camera locations were because they evaded a lot of camera coverage. This suggests premeditation. This suggests someone who planned the attack carefully, who knew the neighborhood layout, who knew where the cameras were and how to avoid them. Detectives also examined the entry point to the Tepe home. No forced entry. So how did the killer get in? Coffindaffer speculated that the killer likely staked out the home and obtained the passcode to unlock the door. Many modern homes have keypad locks or smart locks that can be opened with a code. If McKee had been to the house before, if he had observed Spencer or Monique entering the code, he could have memorized it. Or if Spencer and Monique used a common code like a birthday or anniversary, McKee might have guessed it, or McKee might have simply found an unlocked door. It's possible Spencer or Monique forgot to lock it before going to bed. It's possible the killer simply tried the door and found it open. Either way, the killer walked in without breaking anything, went directly upstairs, and committed the murders. By early January 2026, detectives had built a substantial case against Michael McKee. They had surveillance footage showing his vehicle arriving and leaving at the time of the murders. They potentially had cell phone data placing him in Columbus. They potentially had internet search history showing he was researching Spencer Tepe. They had no alibi from McKee explaining why his car was in Columbus at 3:52 a.m. They had motive, or at least the beginning of a motive. McKee's ex-wife had moved on, remarried, started a family. Maybe McKee couldn't accept that. Maybe he held on to rage for 8 years. Maybe something triggered him in November 2025. On Monday, January 6, 2026, 1 week after the murders, Columbus Police Chief Elaine Bryant spoke publicly about the investigation for the first time. "This case is definitely disturbing," Bryant said. "It's definitely something that we want to make sure that we pour a lot of energy into to try to address and solve. We want to bring some justice to the family." Bryant also said the case could ultimately hinge on one small detail, something a neighbor or witness may not even realize is important. That same day, Columbus police released the surveillance footage of the person walking through the alley. They described the person as a person of interest and asked the public for help identifying them. The video shows someone in a dark hoodie and light pants, head down, walking deliberately through the alley between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. Police said detectives believe the murder of Spencer and Monique Tepe occurred sometime between 2 and 5 a.m. on the morning of December 30th in the upstairs of their residence. Recovered video footage shows a person of interest walking in the alley near the residence during that time frame. The release of the video was a calculated move. By this point, detectives likely already knew who the person was, but releasing the video served multiple purposes. It generated tips from the public. It put pressure on the suspect. It showed the family that police were actively working the case, and it prepared the public for an arrest that was coming soon. On Saturday, January 11th, 2026, 12 days after Spencer and Monique were murdered, police made their move. At 11:57 a.m., Michael David McKee was arrested without incident in Rockford, Illinois. The arrest was coordinated between Columbus Police, the Winnebago County Sheriff's Office, and other law enforcement agencies. McKee was booked into the Winnebago County Jail and charged with 2 counts of murder in connection with the deaths of Spencer and Monique Tepe. The arrest warrant, filed in Franklin County Municipal Court, laid out the evidence. According to the probable cause affidavit signed by Detective Russell Weiner, detectives identified McKee as a suspect through neighborhood surveillance footage. Detectives then linked McKee to a vehicle that arrived just prior to the homicides and left shortly after. Detectives later found the vehicle in Rockford, Illinois, and found evidence that McKee had possession of it before and after the killings. The affidavit doesn't specify what that evidence was, but it was enough for a judge to issue an arrest warrant. McKee's mugshot was released by the Winnebago County Sheriff's Office. In the photo, McKee stares straight into the camera with no expression. His hair is disheveled. He's wearing thick glasses. He looks like someone who just woke up, or someone who hasn't slept in days. The arrest sent shockwaves through both Columbus and Chicago. In Columbus, the Tepe family released a statement. "Today's arrest represents an important step toward justice for Monique and Spencer," the family said. "Nothing can undo the devastating loss of 2 lives taken far too soon, but we are grateful to the City of Columbus Police Department, its investigators, and assisting law enforcement community whose tireless efforts helped to capture the person involved." We thank the community for the continued support, prayers, and compassion shown throughout this tragedy. As the case proceeds, we trust the justice system to hold the person responsible fully accountable. Monique and Spencer remain at the center of our hearts, and we carry forward their love as we surround and protect the 2 children they leave behind. We will continue to honor their lives and the light they brought into this world. In Chicago, OSF Healthcare, the hospital system where McKee worked, issued a brief statement. OSF is cooperating with authorities who will provide any further information, the spokesperson said. McKee's colleagues at OSF St. Anthony Medical Center were reportedly shocked. McKee had been a respected surgeon with no disciplinary issues. No one saw this coming. On Sunday, January 12, 2026, the day after McKee's arrest, hundreds of people gathered at Shootinger Northwest in Upper Arlington, Ohio, for visitation services to honor Spencer and Monique Tepe. The outpouring of support was overwhelming. Friends, family, colleagues, people who had been patients of Spencer's, people who had worked with Monique in education, they came to pay their respects and to support the 2 children who had lost both parents. Rob Misla, Spencer's brother-in-law, spoke about the grief. We're still going through all these different emotions of grief, shock, anger, and disbelief, Misla said. I still see these images of Spencer that are being sent to me, and I just think, he's not gone. Misley also spoke about McKee. It was hard to process that someone from Monique's past, someone who hadn't been part of their lives for 8 years, could allegedly do this. Following the visitation, a celebration of life service was held at Dewey Amici in downtown Columbus. Friends and family shared stories about Spencer and Monique. They talked about Spencer's love for the Bengals and Buckeyes. They talked about Monique's baking and her infectious smile. They talked about the couple's devotion to their children, and they vowed to make sure those children knew how much their parents loved them. On Monday, January 13, 2026, Michael McKee appeared in court in Winnebago County, Illinois, for an extradition hearing. McKee appeared expressionless in the courtroom, wearing a yellow jumpsuit with shackles around his wrists. His public defender, Carrie Poirier, stood beside him. The hearing was brief. McKee waived his right to fight extradition. This meant he agreed to be transported back to Ohio to face charges without contesting the process. His attorney indicated to the judge that McKee intended to plead not guilty in Ohio. Mr. Shaw. McKee believes the most expeditious manner in which he may defend himself against the charges pending in Ohio is to plead not guilty, waive his right to an extradition hearing, and have a governor's warrant for his immediate transport, the attorney said. The judge approved the waiver. McKee would be held in the Winnebago County Jail until Ohio authorities could arrange transportation. Under the law, Ohio had 30 days to retrieve McKee and bring him to Franklin County for arraignment. But that same day, January 13th, something significant happened. The charges against McKee were upgraded. Initially, McKee had been charged with 2 counts of murder. But on Monday, the Franklin County Municipal Court amended the charges to premeditated aggravated murder. This is a critical distinction. Murder charges typically require proof that the defendant intentionally caused someone's death. Aggravated murder adds additional factors that make the crime more serious, such as killing multiple people, killing during another felony, or killing a law enforcement officer. Premeditated aggravated murder adds another layer. It requires proof that the defendant planned the killing in advance. The penalty for premeditated aggravated murder in Ohio is severe. It carries a mandatory sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. In some cases, it can carry the death penalty, though Ohio has had a moratorium on executions in recent years. Columbus police explained why the charges were upgraded. Detectives believe they met the elements for McKee to be charged with aggravated murder, a spokesperson told CNN. The spokesperson did not specify what those elements were, but based on the investigation, it's not hard to guess. McKee allegedly drove 350 miles from Chicago to Columbus in the middle of the night. He allegedly brought a gun. He allegedly walked into the house without breaking in, suggesting he knew how to gain entry. He allegedly went directly upstairs to where Spencer and Monique were sleeping. He allegedly shot them both, multiple times. He allegedly left without harming the children. He allegedly drove back to Illinois. And he allegedly did all of this without leaving a weapon, without leaving obvious physical evidence, and without being seen by witnesses. This is the profile of a planned, premeditated murder. Not a crime of passion, not a spontaneous act of violence, a calculated execution. Former FBI agent Jennifer Coffindaffer explained the significance of the upgraded charges. This is the prosecution saying, "We have evidence that this wasn't just a murder. This was planned. The defendant thought about it, prepared for it, and carried it out with intention. That's what makes it premeditated. And the fact that he killed 2 people makes it aggravated. The penalty reflects the severity of the crime. The question that haunts everyone who knows this case is simple. Why? Why would Michael McKee, a successful surgeon with no criminal history, no history of violence, no apparent mental illness, allegedly drive to Columbus and murder his ex-wife and her husband 8 years after their divorce? What could possibly motivate someone to hold on to rage for that long and then act on it in such a brutal way? We don't know the answer yet. McKee has not made any public statements. His attorney has not revealed a defense strategy beyond the intent to plead not guilty. The motive has not been officially disclosed by investigators, but experts have speculated. Former FBI agent Coffindaffer suggested a theory. Resurgent obsessive jealousy, she said. Delayed resentment over the divorce. Or a sudden eruption of anger upon learning of Monique's happiness with Spencer and their young family. According to Coffindaffer, McKee's internet searches in November 2025 suggest he was monitoring Monique and Spencer's lives. He was looking at Spencer, looking at what he did for a living, looking at where he worked, maybe looking at social media posts showing the happy family, maybe seeing photos of Monique with Spencer and their children, living the life she had moved on to after leaving McKee. And maybe that triggered something. Some people can compartmentalize rejection. They move on. They build new lives. They accept that relationships end and people find happiness with others. But some people can't. They internalize the rejection. They view it as a personal betrayal. They obsess over it. And in rare cases, they act on it violently. McKee's marriage to Monique lasted only 7 months before they separated. But that doesn't mean McKee moved on emotionally. According to at least one report, when Monique filed for divorce in May 2017, McKee had resisted the ending of the relationship and had fought to win back his wife. Social media posts from that time indicated McKee returning home one day to the Virginia residence they shared only to find it empty, with his wife gone. This suggests Monique left suddenly. Maybe she didn't tell McKee she was leaving. Maybe she just packed her things and left while he was at work. Maybe she felt she needed to get out quickly. We don't know. But if that's what happened, it would explain why McKee might have felt blindsided, rejected, abandoned. And even though he went on to build a successful career, even though he moved to different states and appeared to move on with his life, maybe he never really processed that rejection. Maybe it festered. Maybe he checked Monique's social media occasionally over the years, seeing her rebuild her life without him. Maybe he saw her wedding announcement in 2020. Maybe he saw photos of her children. Maybe he saw posts about how happy she was with Spencer. And maybe in November 2025, something pushed him over the edge. We don't know what. Maybe it was seeing a particular post. Maybe it was learning they were approaching their 5th anniversary. Maybe it was seeing how perfect their life looked compared to his solitary existence in Chicago. Or maybe there was something else entirely that we don't know about yet. Maybe there was contact between McKee and Monique that hasn't been disclosed. Maybe McKee reached out and Monique rejected him again. Maybe McKee saw something specific that triggered his rage. We'll learn more as the case proceeds to trial. What we do know is that McKee allegedly drove from Chicago to Columbus on the night of December 29th or the early morning of December 30th. That's a 350-mile drive, about 6 hours. He allegedly arrived in the Weinland Park neighborhood around 2 a.m. He allegedly parked his car somewhere nearby. He allegedly walked through the alley, captured on surveillance cameras. He allegedly entered the Tepe's home without forcing entry. He allegedly went upstairs. He allegedly shot Spencer multiple times. He allegedly shot Monique at least once. He allegedly left the house. He allegedly walked back to his car. He allegedly drove back to Illinois. And he allegedly thought he would get away with it. But he made mistakes. He didn't anticipate that surveillance cameras would capture his vehicle arriving and leaving at the exact time of the murders. He didn't anticipate that investigators would track his car back to him so quickly. He didn't anticipate that his internet search history would show he was researching Spencer in November. He didn't anticipate that the precision of the attack, the fact that it happened at 3:52 a.m., the fact that there was no forced entry, the fact that the shooter knew exactly where to find Spencer and Monique would point directly to someone with inside knowledge, someone who had been planning this. McKee is currently being held in the Winnebago County Jail in Illinois, awaiting extradition to Ohio. Once he's transported to Franklin County, he'll be arraigned on the charges of premeditated aggravated murder. He'll enter a plea, and then the case will move toward trial. The evidence against McKee appears overwhelming. Surveillance footage of his vehicle, possible cell phone data placing him in Columbus, Internet search history showing interest in Spencer. No alibi for why his car was in Columbus at 3:52 a.m. Forensic evidence from the scene that may link him to the murders. We don't know yet what that evidence is, but prosecutors typically don't upgrade charges unless they have strong physical evidence. If McKee goes to trial, the prosecution will lay out a timeline. They'll show that McKee had motive jealousy, rage, inability to accept that Monique had moved on. They'll show that McKee had means he's a surgeon, he has steady hands, he's comfortable with life and death situations, he knows how to stay calm under pressure. They'll show that McKee had opportunity. He lived 350 miles away, but he could drive to Columbus, commit the murders, and drive back in one night. They'll show that McKee's vehicle was in the neighborhood at the exact time of the murders. They'll show that McKee researched Spencer before the attack. They'll show that the attack was calculated, planned, executed with precision. And they'll ask the jury, is there any reasonable explanation for all of this evidence other than that Michael McKee murdered Spencer and Monique Tepe? The defense will have a difficult job. They'll need to create reasonable doubt. Maybe they'll argue that someone else was driving McKee's car. Maybe they'll argue that McKee lent his car to someone. Maybe they'll argue that the surveillance footage isn't clear enough to prove it was McKee's specific vehicle. Maybe they'll argue that the cell phone data is inconclusive. Maybe they'll argue that researching someone online doesn't prove intent to murder them. But based on what we know so far, those arguments seem weak. The evidence appears to be substantial. And the upgraded charges suggest prosecutors are confident they can prove premeditation. If McKee is convicted of premeditated aggravated murder, he will spend the rest of his life in prison. No possibility of parole. No chance of ever walking free. A man who spent years training to become a surgeon, who dedicated his life to saving lives, will die in a prison cell for allegedly taking 2 lives in the most brutal way imaginable. The case has devastated 2 families. Spencer's family has lost a son, a brother, a brother-in-law, a father. Monique's family has lost a daughter, a mother, a light in their lives. 2 children have lost both parents. They'll grow up without their mom and dad. They'll grow up with the knowledge that their father was murdered and their mother was murdered in their own home while they slept downstairs. They'll grow up with the knowledge that the person accused of doing this was their mother's ex-husband, someone they may have never even met. The psychological impact on those children is incalculable. The community of Weinland Park has been shaken. This is a neighborhood where people know each other, where families raise their children, where people feel safe, and now, a double murder. A home where a couple exchanged vows became the scene of their execution. A place that should have been filled with love and laughter is now a crime scene. The ripple effects of this crime will be felt for years. Spencer's patients have lost a dentist they trusted. Monique's colleagues have lost a co-worker they admired. The friends who called 911 that morning will carry the trauma of what they saw. The children will carry the trauma of what they lost. And the Tepe family will carry the grief of what should have been. Spencer and Monique should have celebrated their 5th wedding anniversary on December 13th, 2025. They should have watched their children grow up. They should have grown old together. But they didn't even make it to 2026. The case also raises disturbing questions about obsession and violence. How do we identify people who are dangerous? McKee had no criminal history, no history of violence, no disciplinary issues in his medical career, no red flags that anyone could see. And yet, if the allegations are true, he allegedly harbored rage for 8 years and then acted on it in the most violent way possible. How do we predict that? How do we prevent that? The uncomfortable answer is that we often can't. Most people who go through divorce, even painful divorce, don't murder their ex-spouses. Most people who feel rejected move on. Most people who feel anger find healthy ways to process it. But a small percentage of people don't. They internalize the rage. They obsess, they plan, and they act. Monique had no way of knowing that 8 years after her divorce, the man she once married would allegedly come back to destroy her life. She had moved on. She had built a new family. She had every reason to believe that chapter of her life was closed. But it wasn't. And that's what should terrify everyone who has ever ended a relationship, ever rejected someone, ever moved on from a toxic situation. You can do everything right. You can get divorced legally. You can cut off contact. You can build a new life. And still, someone from your past can allegedly decide they have the right to take that life away from you. Monique did nothing wrong. She married someone. The marriage didn't work out. She filed for divorce. The divorce was granted. She moved on. She found happiness. She did exactly what we tell people to do when a relationship isn't working, and she was allegedly murdered for it. Spencer did nothing wrong. He met someone. He fell in love. He married her. He built a family with her. He was, by all accounts, a wonderful husband and father. He had no connection to McKee. He had no reason to fear him. He had no idea that his wife's ex-husband from a marriage that ended 8 years ago would allegedly become a threat to his life, and he was allegedly murdered for it. The children did nothing wrong. They were innocent babies sleeping in their beds. And they lost both parents in one night because of violence they had no part in, no knowledge of, no way to prevent. This case is a reminder of how fragile life is, how quickly everything can be taken away, how the people we trust to protect life, surgeons, doctors, healers, can allegedly become the ones who destroy it. Michael McKee took an oath when he became a doctor. First, do no harm. Primum non nocere. It's the foundation of medical ethics. Physicians are supposed to heal, not hurt. They're supposed to save lives, not take them. If the allegations are true, McKee violated that oath in the most profound way possible. He allegedly used his knowledge of anatomy, his steady hands, his ability to stay calm under pressure, his understanding of how to end a life quickly and efficiently, and he allegedly used all of that training to murder 2 people. The betrayal of that oath is almost as disturbing as the murders themselves. The trial will likely take place in 2026. It could be months before it goes to court. The prosecution will need time to organize their evidence. The defense will need time to review everything and prepare their strategy. There will be pre-trial motions. There will be jury selection. There will be opening statements. There will be weeks of testimony, surveillance footage, forensic evidence, expert witnesses, 911 calls, crime scene photos, and then closing arguments. The jury will deliberate, and they will deliver a verdict. If McKee is convicted, the sentencing will be straightforward. Life in prison without the possibility of parole. If McKee is acquitted, he walks free. But based on the evidence as we understand it right now, an acquittal seems unlikely. The prosecution appears to have built a strong case. The surveillance footage, the vehicle tracking, the timeline, the lack of forced entry, the precision of the attack, the motive, all of it points to one conclusion. Someone planned these murders. Someone executed them. And that someone was allegedly Michael David McKee. The question is no longer who did this. The question is why. Why would a successful surgeon throw away his entire life to murder his ex-wife and her husband 8 years after their divorce? What was going through his mind when he allegedly drove to Columbus that night? What was he thinking when he allegedly walked through that alley, captured on camera? What did he feel when he allegedly pulled the trigger? Did he feel rage? Satisfaction? Regret? Did he think about the children sleeping downstairs? Did he think about the lives he was destroying? Did he think about the fact that he would almost certainly get caught? Or did he simply not care? These are questions we may never have answers to. McKee has the right to remain silent. He doesn't have to explain himself. He doesn't have to give a motive. He doesn't have to tell us what he was thinking. And he probably won't. But what we do know is that Spencer and Monique Tepe deserved better. They deserved to celebrate their 5th anniversary. They deserved to watch their children grow up. They deserved to live long, happy lives together. And that was allegedly taken from them by someone who couldn't let go of the past. Someone who couldn't accept that Monique had moved on. Someone who allegedly decided that if he couldn't have her, no one could. And so, 2 lives ended. 2 children lost their parents. 2 families were shattered. And a community was left asking how something this horrific could happen to people who seem to have everything going for them. Spencer and Monique Tepe, murdered in their own home, 1 month before their 5th anniversary, 8 years after Monique's ex-husband should have been completely out of their lives, gone but apparently not forgotten. And allegedly, that made all the difference. If this case unsettled you, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe. We're following investigations like this in real time, and the cases we cover next might hit even closer to home. Drop a comment with your thoughts. Should there be better systems to track people who can't let go of past relationships? Should divorce courts assess potential for future violence? Share this video with anyone who needs to understand that moving on from a toxic relationship doesn't always mean you're safe. Spencer and Monique's story is a reminder that danger can come from the past, even when you think that chapter is closed. Stay safe out there. And remember, the person you left behind years ago might still be watching.